Hey, welcome back to Make More Music, the podcast that connects people to music and one another. My name's Chris, and I'm a board-certified music therapist. If you're new here, thanks for joining us. I interview a bunch of different music professionals to show the lives, the career paths, and how people make a living doing what they love with music. Today, I've got an awesome story about a guy who had to find his own path and did a lot of different things and now has his own business. He consults and freelances and helps with being a drum tech, a front of house engineer, and ultimately does a lot of things with what he loves with drums and percussion. So he's got some awesome social media channels where he's putting out all kinds of drum tips and tricks all the time. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. This is Nate Testa with Testa Beat Drums, the Snare Drum Geek. Here he is. All right, Nate, welcome to Make More Music. You and I first connected when I was planning a music therapy prom for Florida Hospital, now Advent Health Orlando, and you connected me with like the Ludwig family. You're like, here, reach out to this guy. And so you're just totally in the whole culture of the nation and, you know, historic drummers. So how's it going? How are you doing during all this quarantine and stuff, man?
Actually, we're doing pretty good. For me and my wife, kind of everything is gone on as normal. My wife is a full-time seamstress, so her shop that she works at in downtown Orlando hasn't closed. They're still receiving customers, and they're kind of keeping under the national range that they would want as many people coming in for like 5 or 10 people. So at most it's like 5 people there. So she's good. And then I'm kind of just still working from home. 90% of what I do is normally from home. And the only thing that changed for me was that there was a couple of gigs that got canceled or rearranged. And actually Sunday's going to be very interesting. So, I mean, if you ever have time later on, we could talk about that later. But I mean, it's definitely a very big change, if you would think so.
You can go ahead and tell us about Sunday then, because you mentioned it to me before about rearranging the church service and what that looks like.
Yeah. So for Sunday, it's only going to be normally the church that I play at least one of them, which is kind of like the main gig. They only have normally 2 services. And so on Sunday, they're only going to be doing one at 10 o'clock. And so how that's going to look is we'll come in, practice will start at 8:30, and it will literally be me, tracks, and then the 2 worship leaders, and probably one of the worship leaders will be like playing either acoustic or electric guitar. And I think if I remember correctly, we're only doing like one song, so it'll be pretty quick, pretty simple, to the point, and then they'll jump straight into like kind of the sermon. And so it's kind of going to be very unique, especially when there's not going to be any audience there. No congregation is going to be there. It's all going to be online. They're going to have like watch parties at different people's houses that will volunteer, that will allow people to come to their houses. But I mean, outside of that, really just going to be people opening up their laptops at 10 o'clock and joining us at the church online via their homes.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how not just churches, but musicians in general are responding. I've seen so many people that I like and listen to are doing, you know, live shows on YouTube or Instagram and things like that. It's cool, man. It's fun to stay connected through all this. So, well,
Definitely.
let's hop into the rapid fire. So I want you to open up,
Cool.
whether it's your phone or whatever, the last place you listen to music. What is the last track you played?
This is the most. I just opened it. I think the song's called Lamarck's or Lamar. It's really weird, but it's a band called Fork, which is spelled FORQ, and it got started by a guy named Henry Hay, and the main guy from it's the main guy from Snarky Puppy, which is the bassist.
Oh.
I believe his name is Michael League. Yeah. And so they had worked together before, and then I think Henry kind of popped it open of trying to do like a collab project together, and they called it Fork. And they're kind of like a jazz fusion kind of band. There's only about 4 or 5 people in it, and it's really like, think of like Snarky Puppy, but like a lot more simpler, much more like guitar led and piano led. Henry's the a main pianist, but so it's very interesting and very. It's like jazz on steroids. Like really, it sounds so good. I just really love that type of music. Kind of like out there and like so much different than the mainstream music that we listen to.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'll have to check that out. All right, next one. I'm wondering if you're going to surprise me. If you were an instrument, what would you be? And you can take it as philosophically as you want.
I actually would get really specific because it kind of matches me so well. And I think you probably were going to expect me to say snare drum. And I am going to say that. But it's going to be, it's going to be, if I would compare myself, it'd be my 1971 Lugwit Superphonic. It's like model 400. It's legit like November 3rd, 1971 is super cool. And the funny thing about that, it has such a story to it. And if you want to go a little depth and kind of give some layers,
that's
or
what it's
philosophical,
for.
whatever.
Let's hear it.
Well, when you look at the outside, the history of that particular snare drum really came from how they built the drum at the time. And they didn't know that you can't plate aluminum without putting something over it, like copper or tin or something that allows the like chrome to stay on the shell. And so they were literally just taking aluminum and then coating it with chrome. And so now with people, whoever had it before me didn't take care of it too well. And now it's like chipping really bad. So you see like, it's like flaking all over the drum. And so from a distance, you're like, man, that's kind of like a crappy looking drum. But if I were to tell you and sit down with you, tell you the story, it would make a lot more sense. So I think I kind of refer that back to myself, where like sometimes you look at me as like, there's not really a lot to go with there. But when you kind of peel back the layers, you see there's a lot more, especially when it comes to like what I do as a living. There's a lot more to what I do than just like, oh, he's a drummer or he's this or he's that. And also the basic thing of a snare drum is that you can tune it to wherever. The great thing I love about that particular snare is that you can like really like tune it to wherever you need it to go. And it doesn't really have like, I mean, it has a sweet spot, but it really can be played with. And as long as you have like, you know, 1 or 2 ply head and some duct tape, you're going to be able to get whatever sound you can imagine out of it, especially with the tools. If you have the tools in your head to get that sound, then yeah, it's a great snare. So that's what I would say I am.
Nice. I love it. I love it. During all this craziness, what is something that's been inspiring you recently?
Oh man.
Could be anything.
The constant push on social media of I saw this one post that somebody shared to their story, and they said, and it was like a couple of them. Actually, it was a guy from England called, his name's Ash Stone, really big like session musician, and he used to play on like The Voice in the UK and stuff like that. Super cool. And he shared this to his story. He's like, creativity is not canceled. And so with so many things being like canceled, and like whether it's my work, whether it's his work, whether it's all other musicians' work, the creativity part is not. And so even though you're stuck at home, even though you may be kind of struggling to pay the bills or coming on to the last like 2 checks that maybe got backlog from another company and they're finally coming in, and that's all you have for the next like month, there's other ways that you can create, not just with content or with music, but ways to create an income. And so when it really comes down to it, I think it's a really great thing that kind of hit me hard, because now I'm kind of thinking of what I can do outside the box of what I've already been doing as I'm legitimately stuck at home. Because normally it's like, oh, I work at home a couple of days and then, oh, I have a gig on Wednesday or something. And then I'm kind of always out and about. But now it's literally like I'm stuck. Like I'm here. If I get bored, I'm cleaning the house. Like there's something like to do, obviously. But yeah, creativity is like something that I feel like, man, that's such a good call to us that are stuck at home and don't feel like we have anything to do, or feeling bummed about all the things that are not happening at the moment. Like, you can always create, whether that be through income or music or anything of that sort.
Well, that leads good into the next one. What is a pro tip or a hack, anything in life that you feel like that you practice that other people should know about?
Oh, creating a to-do list daily. Like, I have this thing called, there's an app called Todoist, and I
Mhm.
had it ever since I had like an Android phone. Since then, switched to Apple. Hey, go Apple. And it's called Todoist, and basically you can write out or type out a daily to-do list each and every day. So there are certain things that kind of stay the same, and they're like, all right, well, I get up normally at 6:30 every day, and there's a lot of things that I want to get done before 10 a.m. So I have a section, or like a subgroup kind of set up, where I have certain things that are under that subgroup called before 10 a.m. And so there's a lot of things, and that's kind of been motivating me to, like, all right, I can get all these things done before 10 a.m. And it makes me feel more excited to get into the day, feeling that I've accomplished all these little things going into my actual workday, which kind of starts around 10, right when my wife leaves for work. So that kind of is something that I really feel people tend to lack or don't keep track of most of the time, because
Mm.
they just get so cluttered with all the stuff they have to do in a day. And it's like, hey, even just writing it out, don't even download the app. If you're not tech savvy, just write it out. Writing it out helps so much, and just organizing your thoughts. And I
Yeah.
learned that, like, the first year going into like doing this full time, like, I had to have some type of like schedule, or I was going to go
Mm.
crazy. Cause then you're all scatterbrained. You don't know what you're doing. Even like the podcast, I had that on my to-do list. I'm like, hey, recording this at 1 o'clock. Like, it helps.
Yeah, man. And I like you kind of hit on that topic of giving yourself some wins early in the day. So, by 10 a.m., you've already checked boxes and your head's in a good place. So,
Hmm.
to switch gears totally, what is your go to junk food?
Oh, I was listening to another episode before this one, and the moment you said that, I was like, boom, Twinkies. That's the one
Oh, there you
thing
go.
that, like, oh yeah, that's the yeah, Twinkies. If I could live off of Twinkies, I would.
Well, no
Twinkies are great.
matter, yeah, no matter how long the quarantine lasts, your Twinkies will outlast you. So that'll be good.
Yes, they will.
Lastly, before we get into the rest, what's a person, project, or an organization that you want to lift up with a shout out?
Man, uh, it honestly, I was thinking about this when you had asked somebody else this, and when it really comes down to it, it kind of be a little broad, but it's just the people in my life. When it really
Hmm.
comes down to it, your shape. When I listened to John Lee Dumas on Entrepreneurs on Fire, he said you are the five people you spend the most time with. And for
Hmm.
me, it's like, oh, bro, like the people that, like, I have been graced enough to be able to be around, to help mold me, to help shape me, for even my wife to like stick with me through all these years of like me not wanting to have a regular job, wanting to be different, wanting to do stuff different, knew that I like hated working for other people and wanted to work for myself. There's just so many people that I could just name off of a list that have just poured their heart when they literally did not have to. And the willingness to be there to support me, I think it's a good reminder for any of us that we are always going to have those people in our lives. And whether it's just one person or two people or five people or 10 people, those people have always help make a difference, with the growth that you have. Or so kind of twisted it on the people that are listening. Like, there's always going to be that person. And
Hmm. Yeah.
luckily for me, I have many of those people.
Well, yeah, that's a good transition to when you were a young child. What were some of your earliest musical memories, and who was influencing you? Who are those people getting you into music?
Well, what I can remember is, at least earliest years, my parents always tell me this story that I was like 2 or 3 years old. they found me one time in the kitchen and I'd organized some pots and pans. It's such a generic drummer story. It's like every single drummer has this story for some
The
reason.
pots and pans story.
But yeah, the pots and pans story. Yeah, I don't know why that's such a thing, but for some reason I had pots and pans, and that's what my parents told me. I put some pots and pans in front of me, and I was kind of playing on them. And my dad plays piano, my mom sings, and my dad sings as well. And so they kind of noticed that I was kind of keeping rhythm. And yeah, so like ever since then, they kind of knew I had some musical abilities, but it was never like, oh, he's going to drum lessons right away. And
Yeah.
it was kind of just letting me kind of grow and nurture. And I played sports growing up and all that stuff. And then the performance wise, music wise, I was homeschooled up until I was in fifth grade. And so normally they have a teacher that kind of checks in and kind of see how the student's doing and how is everything going, how they're developing, or they send some type of representative. And so they were there, and, my dad being the proudful father that he is of his kids, he was like, oh, my son plays drum. And I had a kid at the time, and he's like, oh, my son plays drums. How we play for you? And I was like, what are you doing, Dad? And I was super shy when I was younger. So I was like, Dad, what are you doing? I really timidly ended up playing while he played the piano. And so, yeah, that was another memory. And then my parents always played music growing up, and I can't even remember or tell you what type of music. Normally it was probably Christian music, like Michael W. Smith, or actually a group I grew up with listening to a ton actually was a cappella group. Oh, they had music with them, but it was called For Him. It was like four guys, and I just loved something that always intrigued me was harmonies, and I just loved their renditions of kind of classic songs while I was growing up, because my dad also led worship at some of the churches that he's helped pastored at, and so that was kind of always a thing for me. And even though I didn't sing much then, that really kind of formed some love for really good musicianship and stuff like that. So yeah. And then honestly, growing up, it was really all just watching people. So I would sit there at church and I would literally watch the drummer the entire time. You could not pull me away from me staring at the drummer, intently trying to figure out what they're playing or how they're doing it. Or it was always something along those lines when it came to just drums in general.
That's awesome, man. Did you do any experiences like band in middle school or high school or anything like that?
This is going to be an interesting. So in middle school, I did. And my brothers were always heavily involved. After we all did sports growing up, we played baseball and stuff. But when we got to middle school, my brothers really got into that band thing, and they did band all through high school. And my brother played. My little brother, my youngest brother, played saxophone, and then I'm the oldest, so I have another younger brother. The middle child, Josh, he played kind of everything, any woodwind instrument or kind of any brass instrument. He literally could play anything. So he was main flute, and then he was doing an oboe stuff and really different stuff that he was learning along the way. So in middle school, I did try out for the music group, the band, middle school band that was there. And I did try out for snare drum, and I didn't get it. Yeah, funny. I didn't get it. I practiced really hard, and I just, there was a couple spots left, and I didn't get it. So I ended up playing trumpet for a little bit, and I absolutely hated it so much because I was so pissed that I didn't get snare drum. But I think that also kind of helped me in a way, now that I look back on it, maybe I kind of look at it and man, maybe I didn't prepare as much as I should have, or maybe maybe it just wasn't my time, or I know that by playing trumpet, it introduced me to kind of reading music a little bit and seeing what that looks like, and learning where an A on the scale is, or a C, or any kind of the basic notation stuff earlier on. But I was still really pissed that I didn't get snare drums.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
And then, so you're playing at church while you're growing up and stuff like that?
Yeah, it was here and there. It became a lot more, I it became a lot more prevalent for me playing at church when I was like 9 years old, 9, 10. That's when we moved to Florida. And
Mm.
for me, that's when I kind of remember getting a little bit more involved with the churches we were at. So I would help with like youth group, and kind of build up from there. And then when I turned about 15, that's when a shift kind of changed at the church we were at. And a guy that um, used to live. Sorry, my dog's like going crazy. You can edit this.
It's all right. It's all right. Don't worry about it. My dogs are sleeping right above us right now. So
Yeah.
I know how it goes.
One of them sleeping, the other one's, yeah. Okay.
So you said you were about 15.
Yeah. So when I turned 15, things kind of shifted at the church we were at. And there was a guy that came to our church as the worship pastor that was from I think it's Brownsville, Florida, I believe. I mean, he was a worship pastor before and kind of did it other places. But the real big ticker whenever he got hired was he was part of the Brownsville revival with like Lindo Cooley and that kind of like genre. So very like Southern gospel type of
Awesome.
like four on the floor, like boom chick, like stuff like that. And so that kind of started almost like my melting pot situation where I really started to dive into like what it meant to really be a great drummer and have musicianship and play the simple parts and play to the music and like don't play for yourself, don't add the fill here. If you want to play doom 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 for like the whole song, that's what I ended up doing. Like I learned that very early on, and I can probably attest a lot of the growth that I have from the age of like 15 to 18 really with him and the time that he was there. That's where a lot of that growth happened for me.
So as you're getting up towards 18, I don't know anything about your background, like if you decided to go to music school or anything like that, but what were the decisions as you're ending high school? What were you thinking about doing?
Playing football.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to
What
do.
position?
I played defensive end and a little bit of linebacker while I was in
Cool.
high school. And so I tried applying to different places. Where I really wanted to go is University of South Florida. And um, this has kind of plagued me almost my entire, excuse me, this has kind of plagued me my entire like schooling life is that I was always great with like getting homework done and being a very good student. I was always get A's and B's, but my test taking really wasn't that great.
Mm.
And it had nothing to do with, it really had nothing to do with my lack of study or anything like that. I just really wasn't a great test taker. I believe that I just got maybe really nervous. And so my SAT and ACT scores like weren't great. So that stopped me from getting into schools like USF. And I applied like 6 or 7 times and never
Mm.
once got in. And so for a span of about 2 years, I went to um, So for a span of about 2 years, I went to Valencia Community College, which is
Mm.
based in Kissimmee, Florida, and they have a place right there at their Osceola campus. And so I did that for 2 years. And while I was doing that, I played a little bit of semi-pro football. And basically, you like pay to play essentially. So you pay like $100 or so, and they basically provide you with like jerseys and like you kind of have to get everything else essentially. I think I had to buy a
Mm.
helmet, everything like that. So I was really kind of like all in on this like football thing, and it really wasn't until um, after I got the school that I was at, I kind of realized this really wasn't for me. And I love the idea of working out. I love the idea of staying in shape. But the idea of football, like, was kind of I was kind of losing that passion in that time of my life. And also, I had gotten a really great job on campus. And now this is kind of and I kind of skipped over the school. It's called Southeastern University. It's in Lakeland,
Mm.
Florida.
Yeah,
And
my wife is a dual enrollment teacher there. She teaches a high school class for that school.
oh, super cool. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, So yeah, they so yeah, the school was Southeastern University, and I had the moment I got there, it was like my middle of like sophomore junior year ish. And so I basically had to like gray shirt. With gray shirt is like they didn't scout you, they weren't looking for you, but you basically get a spot in the team. Basically, it's saying it's a little too late for you to join, so they'll gray shirt you to keep your eligibility, and you basically
Mm.
just you go through the workout regimen each and every week on your own. So a lot of self discipline there, a lot of like do it on your own. If the trainer's around and you have a question, you can ask him. But his main focus is the actual guys on the team. So that was a lot of like self motivation, self push. That's kind of always been my thing. I mean, even through those 2 years that I was still playing football, I would have days where I would have to go to school, and so I would go to school, but before that, I would wake up at like 5 or 5:30 with a friend of mine. We would go to the gym, then we would go to Valencia. I'd be there almost all day. Then I'd have to work, and then I wouldn't be home till like 11 or 12. So sometimes I was pulling some long days, and that really was like, but it was always the push of like, I want to do this. I'm going to get out of this. The situation is going to change. It's going to get better. And I really honestly wasn't looking at football. I mean, I wasn't looking at music really that much. I really was kind of
Mm.
like, it was kind of a side thing. I would play at church and stuff. But the main focus was, man, I want to be, I want to be a football star. Like I want to play in the NFL and stuff like that.
So you said you were getting a little burned out on football. Like, what caused that burnout? And then what kind of drew you back into music?
Um, I think it was the realization that I wasn't as good as I thought I was.
Mm.
I would always push myself. I would always um, like work really, really hard, and yet I think there's just a natural. Um, I I think you just have to come to the realization that um, I wasn't getting better than anybody else. And so, as in, like, there were guys that are just naturally gifted in playing sports. And even though I had to work a little bit harder, I was getting there, but it was like, man, I think you're kind of born to do stuff that you're naturally good at. And I'm not saying that, like, if you're not naturally good at something, sometimes people do have to work a little bit harder, but it makes more sense to me to go after something that has not just been in your life for a long time, but that you can improve on pretty
Mm.
much instantly. Like
Lean on your gifts, huh?
yeah, lean on your gifts. Exactly. Like I definitely had an ear to play music. Like there's a lot of times where I would come into like sessions and I would have to listen to a song before that session and literally try to figure out all the parts by then or come up with parts on my own. Or we're like going back and forth saying, hey, like, what do you want on this or what do you want on that? Like it's really a gift that a lot of people don't have. And it's something that's developed and worked on. And you just continually get better at it, obviously. But some people just don't have that ear for it. And for me, I just didn't have the physical ability to push myself over that hump of going to that next level. But I really felt that I could do that um, with music, especially because, like I said, I had a opportunity for a job on campus with sorry about that. I had a
Okay.
job on campus for basically it was just you were working on media stuff for the school. So basically, if anything happened, media services. Sorry about that. So basically, what they would do is they would just go and like do all the events on campus. So you'd be doing sound, you'd be setting up stuff, you setting up lights. If they had a big party or something or a get together with all the students, you would be setting up all that stuff. So it was a good job, and I was excited about it, and that kind of pushed me. Like, man, I don't think I'm going to be able to do both, and I kind of really want this job. And I was already feeling that tug of like, I really want to start looking to like what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I don't think that's here in football. And so when I went, it was a meeting for like a position meeting with all the defensive linemen and stuff. And in that meeting, I kind of like towards the end of the meeting, uh, I ended up telling the coach and them like, hey, I think this is just not for me, and told them reasons why. And I was like bawling my eyes out because I've never quit anything in my life. Like I was just like, my parents always taught me like, hey, you either, when you start something, you're going to finish it. And with that particular mindset, that was probably one of the hardest things I ever had to do.
Mm.
But they completely understood and they completely supported me, because at the end of the day, if I stay on, I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting their time, and I much rather would have them have people that are dedicated, fully in it, ready to go to win a championship, to work hard, and to have an opportunity to get a starting position or move on to another level or whatever the case is. And so that was kind of the thought process. And that day, I went back to my dorm. I kind of called my my fiance at the time, now my wife, and she came and picked me up, and kind of just because full like tell people understand why she picked me up. It's because sports people came like a month or two early to school, and they would basically live on campus, and
Mm.
it would basically be all these sports people, all anybody that played a sport, they were on campus at least a month and a half before. So I didn't really need to be there for another like 2 or 3 weeks. So
Yeah.
yeah, so she kind of came in, and at the time I didn't have a car, so she came and picked me up, and that was kind of it for that particular situation.
Well, you said you were starting to realize, man, I have these gifts that I'm not leveraging. So, what was the first steps into getting you towards being, Testa Beat Drums, the drum sultan, and all the things like that? What are the steps between that to there?
Um, it was really kind of just like focusing in on school. And so I was taking a lot of classes that had to do with like, recording arts, and kind of giving me the basis of that. And then also I like helped do the live stream that our school did for all of our services, through um, through the week, and
Hmm.
doing like front of house stuff and tech stuff, not even referring to drums, but also like while we were set up stuff for the live events, obviously for our chapel services, the main ones at least, they would have drums all the time. So I would always jump to like trying to help out with miking the drums and making sure that the positioning was good. And that kind of really always intrigued me when it came to that aspect, because I was always the guy at my church too that like whenever heads need to be changed, or I would suggest, hey guys, like the heads kind of need to be changed, it's been a while, they would just be like, all right, cool. And so they will order the heads, and if you can come in on a day that you're free, you can change out the heads. And so that's always been like a thing for me. Like I've always really like been intrigued by that type of stuff, and then being able to do that in school really like helped me develop those skills. And so it was a combination of that. It was a combination of being introduced to a really good friend of mine, mentor named Israel Batista. He is a recording engineer at River Bear Studios in Orlando,
Mm.
and he just was one of those people that just poured into me. I was super ignorant early on, and like being somebody that knows so much as he does, he was very patient with me, and just basically able to say, no, that's wrong, here's the facts. And I'm like, okay. And it was kind of that constant process of him continually like proving me wrong. And it still happens. He's a very intelligent individual, and has done a lot in his lifetime, whether it's just like being in the military or going to Full Sail University, or just doing a lot, and is like right 90% of the time. So I get corrected by him more so than not. And sometimes it's like, oh, so there's very rare times that he'll say, oh, actually, I didn't know that. So when I do, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Oh man, I feel so smart now. But
You're like leveled up. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But that, like, again, that like rarely happens. But it was also getting in contact with him, and him just pouring into me when it came to drums and drum history, and like even when it comes to like products and stuff like that, like nothing is really, a phrase is like, there's nothing new under the sun. Like mostly everything that you could think of that's been done has been done when it comes to drums. There are still a lot of advances that are happening with people that build things or whatever. But yeah, when it came to him, it was just all drums, and it came to recording, and I would ask him questions, and I still ask. He's my number one go-to source. After I've kind of looked over stuff at Google and I can't find something, some things you just can't find online anymore because it's like not there, or you have to dig into a forum or something. And most of the time, he's good on the information that he has. So it was diving in with him, mic techniques. I did sessions at that studio as well, so it's also developing how I play sessions and how I approach sessions now. So that kind of really developed me as kind of an overall when it came to like live drumming, my thought process. Like he had a really big impact on how I approached being a drummer, being a drum tech, being an engineer. He really kind of peeled that curtain back and kind of showed behind this great world of studio recording. And so that kind of also trickled into me learning and diving more on my own, because I had all these drums in my house. There was a point where I had like, I think I counted like 17 or 18 snares at a moment in time.
Wow.
And that was definitely getting on hoarder type of status pretty quick. But the cool thing about having that, and whether it was a lower end drum or a higher end drum, I was able to play around with their tuning, grab some heads, switch out things, play around with what sounded good, what didn't sound good. And when it really kind of boiled down to it, I kind of focus on, all right, well, the main goal is how everything sounds in a studio. So why not treat every single situation like that? Because you get, he's one of those people that gets amazing raw drum sounds in his studio. And so if that's the focus in a studio, why can't that be the focus in live? So for me, it's like, that's why I'm always kind of like tweaking and playing with things, even though you have so much room for error when it comes to live, because there's so many things happening.
The variables.
Yeah, there's way too many variables. You can't control everything that ever happens. So that kind of instilled in me that idea of, well, I can take the same approach, even though it may not mean as much. It definitely will help a ton going forward. So that's kind of how I approached it. He doesn't really think so. Like, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But I mean, I really think it does. And even though it may be just a small difference, that's really exciting for me. And as I continue to kind of dive into this, so that's kind of a lot of the story, is like, he really helped me kind of go and navigate through this wild, like journey and like rabbit hole of drums. And I continue to like dig deep into like, drum forums and like groups on Facebook and stuff like that, to like really hear everyone's ideas. Even though I know now at this point, a lot of people are wrong. I like to hear what they have to say. Just because we have, I mean, I that sounded really prideful. That I don't think well, sometimes they are wrong though. Straight up.
Well, no, I mean, that's the internet. Everybody seems like they know everything and they can speak confidently. But I was just talking with a guy at a guitar store and talked to him about the challenges of running a brick and mortar shop this day and age. He goes, people come in with something they got on Reverb or eBay, and somebody else told them it was this, and it's a piece of crap, So
yeah.
And he goes, well, I thought it was worth this much. And they're like, well, that's what a person on the internet told you. So I feel like when we were growing up, it was like, not everything you hear on TV is true. Now it's like, not everything you hear on the internet is true.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I loved it. It's kind of like a weird connection. I was listening to the podcast before. I think it was like your episode 10. And one of her things was like, to be mindful of or something, is like watch what you curate, like, or what you take in. And I was like, man, that's so good, because like, man, if you're not informed, and he preaches this Israel talks about this all the time. If you're not informed and you're going to all the wrong sources, you're just going to be blindly informed, and you're not going to like, that's not really the truth about what's being said about this particular topic. And so that's why it serves to go to several different places and say, hey, is this correct? If you have, it's just like school. Like, if you have several different places or sources that are showing you, all right, you're getting the same answer every single time. It's like, all right, this this must be
This
like,
might be
yeah,
it.
this
Yeah,
might
yeah,
be it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, that's exciting, man. So, what would you say? What are all the different services you offer? Because basically, you're running your own private business.
Yes.
Um, so, what are all the services you offer, and what does it look like on a day to day before coronavirus quarantine? And then, you talked a little bit about what it's like now, but what are all the things you do in an average week?
Right. So, if it's like a busy week, which sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, I will normally I try to have off on Mondays and Tuesdays. My wife normally has off on Mondays and Tuesdays, so it makes the most sense. I may do a little bit of work, maybe a little bit of social media posting, which doesn't really take a lot of time for me. But normally I try to have those 2 days free. And then Wednesday, it's kind of like going from the whole wake up at 6:30, do my before 10 a.m. tasks. Normally on Wednesdays, we actually go to the gym as well. So I'm doing that. I always get a really nice, like 30-minute walk in with the dog, my two dogs. So I'll kind of get out there, I'll pop on a podcast and kind of like, I'm basically like, it's my version of drinking a cup of coffee and looking at the newspaper.
Mm,
I have a couple of
ramping up.
yeah, I
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
couple
yeah.
of podcasts that I listen to that have like tech news briefing and a couple like NPR things that kind of keep me updated on what's going on. So kind of like general news kind of situations, and then go to the gym, come back, get ready. My wife leaves for work around 9:30, and or I'll take her to work because that day I normally will go and I'm helping out a local church in Kissimmee with doing their sound for their youth group. And
Mm.
so that's a gig I have. I've been working with him for about a year or so. Ever since he kind of took over as a youth pastor, he's been a really good friend of mine for a really long time, and I kind of like jumped in to kind of help him from the get go. So that'll happen on Wednesdays. It kind of brings up my whole day. I'll work on a couple of things that I have on my to do list, but that kind of I'm over at the church around 2, maybe 3 o'clock up until around 9:30, 9, and then I'll drive home. So uh, that's kind of the day for that. And then it kind of just kind of off and on. It's really like a lot of the gigs that I end up getting are like calls that I'll get. And it's like, oh, it's a company that I've worked for a couple of times. And so they've called me and they have something coming up. So then if it's like a week's time, then I'll be out of the house for a couple of days and it's all local stuff. I'm driving like maybe like an hour or so to get somewhere. Or sometimes it's in Kissimmee, sometimes it's in Orlando or Lakeland. Sometimes it's in Tampa. So kind of all over the place. So I do. That's what a normal day looks like, essentially. And if you kind of back out me going to a church, it's kind of what a normal day looks like for me. And then I also going through all the services. The main service I'm really pushing is me servicing drums at local churches, venues, and for personal use. So I started that at the beginning of 2018, and it's kind of been going strong. I'm still looking to grow. I'm connecting with people, but right now I'm at about 7 churches that I kind of have worked with over that 2 year span. And basically, I'll just come in and I service their drums and I kind of evaluate. I try to at least like to come in like month 3 of a 6-month period, trying to evaluate. If it's a new church, I want to come in at least before I do the service, so I see what I'm kind of putting myself into. I just don't know how bad the drums have been over that time. I don't know how bad the heads are. Do both side, the resonant and batter side, need to be changed? So all those questions need to be kind of answered before I like actually go full in with that church. And so yeah, that's kind of the so that's what kind of, ooh, huh. That's what that kind of looks like on that end. And I'm again working with about 7 churches right now, and that was a cool start because you kind of have to sell people on the idea of the service itself. It's not the drum maintenance and tuning and all that stuff. I can do that in my sleep. It's me being a salesman and saying, hey,
Mm.
this is a service that could really benefit you guys, and you could, and my push is like, you can save money by doing this, even though you're paying me twice a year or 3 times a year, or however often you want me to come here, I'm keeping the maintenance up on the kit that you don't have to buy a new kit every 2 years or something, or
Mm.
it's not being trashed or worn out, and then you're stuck with this really crappy kit. I like clean the shells. I'll clean the wrap with a finish on it to make it look shiny again. And it almost looks like a brand new kit again. So that's kind of the push, and it's really just showing them that the service is needed, and that's going to help them save money over time, which I think every church or venue or person wants to do, is eventually be able to save money. Mainly the churches. Like for people, it's really just like, hey, I just don't have the time to do it. Can you do this for me? Or can you, like, I can't. I've had somebody come that literally just wanted me to tune it because they just can't get the sound that I normally bring out of drums through the way I tune. And so they're just like, dude, I'm coming into a lot of struggles right here. And so they'll come over to the house, and I'll just kind of walk them through, and hopefully they're going to be able to get it. But if not, then like it's more work for me, I guess. Like, but I generally do want to help people when it comes to that. And so I also do like tuning lessons. I also do gigs and stuff. I play drums, so I have that on my website as well. Really just an assortment of things. I haven't pushed a lot of things on there yet, but even like offering social media help and services, like running your social media for businesses, kind of just a lot of things. But it really kind of really focuses on doing session work, being a drum tech, whether hired out on a tour or just a one-off gig, and then the drum maintenance for people. And then I try to like write blogs and stuff, and then sorry, and the very main thing kind of is that kind of generates the most money for me is actually doing like live like technician work. So like it's really like being a front of house engineer, being a monitor engineer, being a hand, being an AV tech. There's a certain company in Lakeland, Florida that I've kind of been freelancing a lot with, and I met them through school when I was doing media services. It was literally like the first event that I did, and we helped them load in everything. And they were saying, "Hey, we're looking for people to kind of fill in some spots during the summer. And you guys, if you guys are available, like hit us up. Here's my email. Here's my phone number, and just hit us up, and we'll get you situated." And so that's where I kind of started off with them, and then it kind of evolved. And this year, I'm kind of doing a lot more like engineering work, as in being a monitor engineer and kind of developing those skills along the way.
That's exciting. It seems like you were saying way back earlier, and kind of hearing your personality, it seems like being able to do a lot of different things, but all related to drums and music and things like that, seems like it jives really well with your personality. Would you say that?
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of fun to kind of. I've always wanted to be that jack of all trades, but also not of none. Though I actually wanted to be very proficient in those things, and so that's where it's like a slow process, and like it's really kind of being willing to be patient and take the time to invest into this skill at this moment in time, and being okay with that, because at the end of the day, it's work, and it's something that I'm able to still keep putting on that checklist of, hey, I don't have to do Uber, I don't have to work another job, like I can actually do this full time. And that's kind of always the goal. And I mean, growing up, I'm a massive podcast nerd, and I would just listen to podcasts all the time. And that's what a lot of professional drummers would say, is like, you got to be willing to do more than just one thing. You can't just like we're kind of past the time of just being the drummer. Like it's very rare for anybody nowadays.
I think it's not even just drums. That's kind of
Oh
everything.
yeah. Yeah.
That's exciting. So, uh, for me, as someone who uses percussion, who is not very good at something like drum set, what would you say are some simple things that you would recommend, or just any tips you give people for very starting things about, miking percussion or ways to play percussion? What do you tell somebody who's new to that?
Um, don't feel like you have to play a ton. It could be as simple as like taking your hand and putting it on your knee and just doing. I don't know if the mic picks that up, but just something so
Yeah.
simple that can make a huge difference not just with like yourself, but with the group. If you're sitting down and doing like a therapy session with the group, and all they're doing is taking like a djembe and they're hitting it a couple times, it's just the it kind of brings people together. It's that uniformity of like being able to create this sound as one unit. And that's kind of what
Yeah.
drummers end up doing, is that like we're using four limbs and sometimes five, because some drummers sing like Phil Collins or something, they'll sing. And so you're using all these different like limbs to all make this one beautiful sound. For some people, a wall of noise that's called the drums. And that's all I'll say. Just keep it simple. I think people just try to complicate like percussion and drums just way too much.
And then kind of related specifically to your different roles, what are some things that people might not know or have myths about things like maintenance for drums?
Uh oh man. I think this doesn't really apply too much to the maintenance of drums, but when you're playing and the longevity of your cymbals, I think people have a very big misconception on what the right how the right way to hit a cymbal is like
Let's hear it.
given. So I really think, and I've been playing around with this idea a lot. And again, my buddy Isra does this. Is when you hit the cymbal, you never hit it exactly on. You kind of like sweep over it. So instead of like giving a lot of force straight, it's like you're not playing through it. Um, if I can give like a vocal representation, kind of like you would take um, your hand, instead of like going straight down like a up and down
Like
motion.
smacking it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you would do it almost at an angle where you're almost sweeping over it and kind of hitting it, but it kind of, you can see the cymbal spin a little bit around the cymbal stand. And so it's
Like a samurai slice instead of a
absolutely,
axe chop.
that's a
Yeah.
perfect example. Yeah. And so that kind of gives your longevity of the cymbal, and also your tilt. Like having cymbals flat, that bothers me so much when I see drummers do that, because you're then hitting the edge of the cymbal, and that's going to crack that cymbal so quick. Like it's not even gonna, like having them tilted down a little bit so that when you do come up, you're hitting it at an angle where you're not damaging the edge of the cymbal. And so whether that's adjusting how high you come up with your hit, that all that plays an effect. And so adjusting according to where you want to get to with your cymbals, that always helps. And so like everything can have an effect, just because, and this is kind of like brings it all together. Just because another drummer does it doesn't mean it's good for you too. It
Mm.
doesn't. I think that could be applied to anybody that plays any instrument. It's like just
Mhm.
because you see somebody else do it, that may work for them, but it's probably not going to work for you, because they probably do that for a particular reason, like why they have it like that. Whether it's literally just for show, or whether it's because they like it that way, or they like a cymbal tilted like away from them instead of towards them. Like that's their, like they've been playing for 15, 20 years. Like you can let them do that, but you may be in a situation with your journey that doesn't require you to do that, or doesn't help you, while you were to angle your cymbal in a different way like this other person did.
Well, um, oh, hold on. I had a thought and then it just went away.
That's
Let's see. Oh, yeah. So you've had the opportunity to work with some really cool people. You've been doing this for a while now. What would you say are some of your favorite memories, things that you've been able to do through starting your own business and doing all this interesting work?
um, probably interesting so far was being able to go on a tour. It was the first year I was doing everything in 2018, and a buddy of mine I met in college ended up starting to play for this artist, and they just needed some extra help. And so we like figured out a price and all that stuff. And I was on the road for like about a month or so. And I was kind of able to see like a bunch of different states, and really
It's cool.
experience like just being on the road, and how to operate with different people, and having a tear down process. I mean, actually, a slight little plug. I did have an interview with a buddy of mine, Dan Radin, on the Drum Showroom podcast. That, I mean, he doesn't really do much with that podcast anymore, but he did interview me while I was on the road, and so that's kind of like a cool
Sweet.
perspective in my lifetime. That if anybody wants to listen to it, it's out there
Yeah, we'll link that.
on
We'll
the
link that in
webs.
the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, let's wrap into these last couple. I love your perspective on the music industry and just getting out there and trying different things. So, I want to know the how and the why that you inspire people to make more music.
Man, I think the how would be simply just being present with people. It does a lot for people to know that you kind of have their back, and
Mm,
and you give them the opportunity to make um, better music or more music, or even have a good service. I think just being able to know where you stand, know your role, and be okay with that role is
mm,
really, really important. Because like I could be the stuck up prideful drummer and want to do solos all the time, but that doesn't help the process of making music.
yeah.
It's your part to play the drums the way they're supposed to be played, and play in a way that you're not the artist, that the artist is the artist, and you're all having one goal of like creating music and being able to create
Mm,
something that people are going to want to listen to. I think we're so caught up in this, like, I want to get a banger, I want to go viral, and something like a quick fix, when in reality those quick songs don't last very often. It normally kind of stays and it'll be there for a little bit of time and then dies off because we're so quick to jump to the next big thing. So in
mm,
reality, you're seeing a lot of these bigger, I mean, people that I really enjoy listening to, people like John Mayer and Bon Iver, and all these people that are coming up or have come and are making music that literally stays. Like, you can walk down the street and still hear somebody playing "Dancing in a Burning Room." Like, that's
mhm.
such a classic song for people, that when it comes to music that it'll stay. And yeah, I mean, I think that answers both.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, if you were talking maybe to your teenage version of yourself, or someone who is a teenager that's a drummer, or someone that's burnt out in their career, what would you tell them to inspire them to, do all those things you're saying, to be present and whatnot? What would you tell that person?
um, be willing to have patience. Be willing to have patience, because there's definitely musicians out there that feel burned out. And I think being able to take a step back, I actually put a post out about this on social media, and it was kind of like a cool, like, slow mo. I was doing a snare roll on a snare drum, and it kind of slow mode the snare roll, and then it was kind of cool. But in the post, I was like, man, sometimes we need to be able to take a step back and slow things down to evaluate like where we're at, and how this situation could benefit us. And so being able to really slow down, being able to have patience through the tough situation, through your dry period in your music making career, or even just like getting burnt out with like so many things going on. And that also attests
Mm,
to like, maybe you're not giving yourself enough time to rest. Rest is so important. And people think it's always about go, 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 go. But like, no, like, you need to, like, we're human. We get burnt out. We get uninspired. And so there's just, sometimes it's just better just to take a step back and find
mm.
that quiet place you can run off to, or go for a walk. That's why I love my walks in the morning. Even though I have a podcast playing, it gives me opportunities to like think, and like, it's just not even worry about things that are happening that day, because I already have them planned out. So it's really just giving me an opportunity to just enjoy the walk, or enjoy the dogs, and all that stuff.
That's awesome, man. Well, Nate, it's been great chatting with you. It's cool to hear your perspective and how you've carved out this niche, and you're just really serving, you know, the world as a whole through your social media, but really digging into Central Florida and the people all around you and
Yeah.
just being present. So somebody's waxing up their surfboard for the World Wide Web. Where do you want them to look for all of your stuff?
You can go to www.testabeatdrums.com. That kind of like is my central hub for everything. All social media platforms are Testa Beat Drums. And the only one that is different is TikTok, which is the Drum Nerd. And so I'm kind of just playing around with stuff like that on TikTok and whatnot. But yeah, you can basically that's all you need to know. I mean, sorry. YouTube is just Nate Testa. So if you type in Nate Testa, you'll be able to find me.
Sweet. And I think that's our first TikTok shout out of the show.
So. Oh, it's such a great app.
You get an award, I guess. So, that's awesome. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate your time. For Nate and Chris, remember, everybody, give more love, share more grace, and make more music. All right, if you loved that episode, I would love if you'd go check out any of Nate's stuff at his website, social medias. He's always putting out a ton of content, so go check him out. All the links are in the bio. If you love this episode, the best way you could support me and the freest way you could support me is tell somebody that you think would love this show. Pass it along, text it to them, send them in an email, whatever. While we're all social distancing, send a little bit of love their way. You can also join us on Instagram at make.more.music. And if you know someone that should be a guest, if you're a brand that's looking to partner, if you need help editing your own podcast, if you want some special theme music or someone to collaborate with, hit me up, makemoremusicpodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'll catch you all on the next one. Give more grace, share more love, make more music.